So hello again. Um, this feels weird sitting down and doing this video because I'm not even 100% sure when or even if I'll upload it. I had a little bit of a, well, at the time I'm recording this, it's July 12th, and I did a vlog earlier in the day before my daughter came over, a ranting slash venting vlog. That I really hate doing those vlogs. Like, I want to talk and I want to get that stuff off my chest, but then later on I have all that remorse and guilt and just feeling like stupid, like I just whined and cried like a baby and did a stupid video. And what a wonderful roller coaster ride this this vlogging deal is. But anyway, so now I'm sitting here, it's 11 o'clock, my daughter just got picked up about 15 minutes ago. I was just watching YouTube videos earlier and I kind of stumbled into that 80s part of YouTube, and I've already been dealing with some of this here lately. Something else that I haven't really talked about as much, maybe hinted at a little bit, or maybe the more perceptive among you might not be surprised to hear this, but I have been just like super longing for like my childhood, like my teenage years and stuff, like mid to late 80s into the early 90s. Just kind of wish that I was back in those times. And video games is one of those things that puts me in that spot, but music is another thing that does. Probably a lot more effectively than gaming, because like I wasn't a gamer, so to speak, back in the mid to late 80s. I had an Atari system in the earlier 80s. I didn't really get back in the console kind of thing until the early 90s. So that time from about 1985 to around 1990 or 91, or even I guess 92 through my entire high school time, it's music that really like takes me back. Like it does for so many people. Memories, you know, from music, when you heard music. I'm a guy who often will say, you know, a certain band, a certain album, a certain time frame, a certain genre of music could be easily labeled as like the soundtrack of my life, or the soundtrack of a certain time in my life. When it came to the 80s, for me, I was all about just regular pop music, soft rock, nothing too out there, nothing too outrageous. I wasn't a metal fan, I wasn't a hair band fan. I didn't really start to get into rap music until the late 80s. So, you know, in the 80s for me it was anything from like Wham to the Cars, Don Henley, some of those kind of like one-hit wonder type songs like Aha, Take On Me, hell, even like Flock of Seagulls, I Ran, just all kinds of stuff, like all over the place back then. Groups like, I lost the name of the one, Human League, Tapao, Cutting Crew, of course big bands like U2, Paula Abdul, Mariah Carey's early stuff, Billy Joel, Elton John, George Michael when he went out on his own after Wham fell apart or whatever happened with all that. Just stuff like that. Weird Al back in those days. I was just so into that kind of stuff. The new wave stuff, the just pop stuff, the soft rock. Nothing that was too edgy, nothing that was too provocative, nothing that was too angsty and you know, speaking to my teenage brain cells back then. That came later. I was into that stuff. I got into grunge. I got into rap music. But it wasn't really until the 90s had broke that I started to get into that. In the mid 90s, when I finally started to get into things like Nine Inch Nails and, stuff that was really out there, darker stuff and whatnot. But the 80s was all about that pop sound, that happy, fun. And before all of this shit today where it's all about, freaking getting drunk and partying and promiscuous sex, like, I don't like the promotion of that kind of stuff. I'm not saying that a person has to be married and all that kind of stuff and you have to be prudish about it. But at the same time, that's personal and in your own life. I don't really care much for music that just kind of gushes that all over the place and teaches young people, to be, to have that kind of lifestyle. Anyway, that's not what I came here to talk about, but the particular person that I stumbled across tonight, not stumbled across, but just like, kind of like, oh, whoops, I was looking at this and now I found you again. But it was my favorite 80s musician, my favorite 80s singer, writer, whatever you want to call it. You've got singers, you've got singing groups, you've got bands, you've got musicians and all that nonsense. But when it comes down to it, when you look at that which was popular in the 80s in some way, shape, or form, my favorite of all of them was a lady by the name of Debbie Gibson. Most people nowadays probably wouldn't know who that is unless they're, at least in their late 20s and into their 30s. But she was like, the 80s pop princess. She was the 80s version of Britney Spears, only, she never got into that phase of the skin and the provocative nature of things and the shaving her freaking head and being a little crazy. Which, by the way, I have to give it to Britney Spears for kind of, getting her shit together here in the last few years. I'm not saying that it's all, perfect, that she's totally redeemed herself, but seems like she's gotten her act together a lot better than some other people. But yeah, for at least for a short period of time, Britney Spears, Debbie Gibson was, like the teen version of Madonna, except once again, without all the provocative nature to the music and all that kind of stuff. But she was very, very big and popular for a while. She only had like 3 real albums out, roughly from 1987 to somewhere around 91 or 92, because I remember listening to her third album when I was in high school, so that was at least in 1992. But I was just like, I crushed on her so much. I've talked about people from my younger days that I had crushes on, who were people that I knew. When it comes to like a celebrity crush, no one could even hold a candle to Debbie Gibson. I just thought that she was amazing. I thought she was beautiful. I thought that her songs were great. Her message was great. Her lyrics were great. Those were all written by her. She wasn't one of these people who was being fed songs from another source. That was all her heart poured out onto the page and in her music. And she had fun. More important than anything else, she never came off as like, I have to look a certain way and I have to market myself. And maybe this is a testament to the 80s, to that time. But she was not a marketed and, slapped on the side of this and that and put out there. Not to say that there weren't things to buy, t-shirts and stuff in addition to that. Hell, I was a member of her fan club. I wish I would have dug that out. I still have what I got from that, which included like an autographed 8x10 and just some this and that. I just thought that she was amazing. It's unfortunate that she came along at the time that she did, I wish that she either would have came along about 5, 6, 7 years earlier, or even though her sound would have to be a little different, if she were to come out now, she might be a little bit more accepted. But she came out in the late 80s, and the 90s were the birthplace of popular hip-hop music, like crossed into the mainstream. Grunge and alternative musics got popular and into the mainstream. Everything in the 90s turned darker and gritty, more mature. Language was more acceptable, skin was more acceptable, freakish type people were more acceptable. People like Marilyn Manson, people in groups who wore lots of makeup and all that kind of stuff. Not to say that, like you look back to the 70s, you see Ziggy Stardust, you see lots of people who were pushing the envelope. But the 90s were when, in my opinion anyway, if you feel a different way, that's fine, but I really feel like the 90s was the decade when all that kind of stuff became more acceptable all around, and TV was pushing the envelope, MTV was pushing the envelope, the WWE was changing and becoming more mature. Everything was going from what was popular for the kids in the 80s was becoming the teenagers and the 20-somethings in the 90s, and everything had to grow up. And even though Debbie grew up, like I believe she's 43 now, she's just a couple years older than I am, but she always stayed pretty clean and innocent, I guess you could say. So she came along at the wrong time. She had enough time to dominate the radio waves and have some number one hits. And it was like in 1988 when the song Foolish Beat came out. She was 17 years old, and she became the youngest woman to ever write, produce, and perform a number one hit, which is, pretty amazing. And she had her time there for a little while. It just that then everything changed, Attitudes changed, perspectives changed, and that kind of music and that kind of fun, the imagery in her videos, it just became, too kiddified. It was too innocent and young. And so I don't know, really, honestly, don't know a whole lot about her career since then. I mean, I know that she's done Broadway stuff. I know that she's done some singing competition type shows or whatever. I know she's recently was diagnosed, I think, with Lyme disease. She's been dealing with that. And, that sucks. I've liked her on Facebook and follow her on Twitter, and I see some stuff of hers on YouTube. It's not the same experience that it used to be for me, keeping up with her now and wanting to know about what's going on in her world now. But back then, for a handful of years, she literally was my entertainment. Like TV shows were fine and everything, but when I wanted to have fun, when I wanted to listen to music, there was such a focus on what she was doing. That's why those songs, I hear them again now, I get taken right back to that time. And I start to just, yearn and ache inside to go back to those days, and to go back to when I was like 13, 14, 15, 16 years old and think, okay, now I've got the next 25 years laid out in front of me, instead of being now and looking back and saying, wow, those 25 years are gone. And, you never get to go back to those times. There's no time travel. It's never going to happen. It's fun to joke about Back to the Future, like next year was the year that all the Back to the Future stuff, the first movie took place in. Or the second one, I don't remember which one, but we're never going to get to do all that, because if that had happened by now, we would have already encountered people who were traveling back from the future. It's not going to happen. I won't ever get to go back to 1987 and listen to that music for the first time again. I'll never get to go back to 1991 and 92 when myself and my cousins Jesse and Shane, and occasionally my friend John, But mainly Shane and Jesse and myself, we would sit down and we would watch these videotapes of Debbie Gibson, like a concert, and then another one had some music videos on it, and we would freaking sit there and watch all those tapes in the same sequence every time, singing along to the songs. Every time a slow song, a ballad would come along, we would pop our sunglasses on and sing along to it. And I forged such a bond with those two in those instances of watching those videos. And yeah, I feel a little silly about it now, how serious we all took it, but you know, I can't ever erase those good memories. That stuff will never ever go away. And now the internet, you know, brings me to YouTube, and I was honestly, tonight I was looking at Faith No More videos. Faith No More is another band from around that time, and they were kind of a different band. They were pushing the envelope. I read quotes from people who said, excuse me, they said that Faith No More kind of like paved the way for bands like Nirvana and whatnot to come out and be accepted. And they were the pioneers of what's called alternative metal, a meeting of alternative music and metal. I mean, I always thought that they were, you know, a little ahead of their time, but it's amazing that people hold them in that regard. But anyway, I'd heard one of their songs today at work while I was listening to my MP3 player, and I wanted to find the video if it was on YouTube. They're a band that's kind of hard to find actual videos for, or at least I thought they were. It seemed pretty easy for me tonight. But I wanted to share it on Facebook and elsewhere, and I come across it, and I watched a couple other Faith No More videos, and then there was well, no, I clicked on Rhino Entertainment's YouTube channel, and that was where I stumbled across Debbie's videos on their page, and I was like, wow. I spent a good hour to an hour and a half looping the same 6 songs by Debbie over and over again, and just listened to them, and I didn't know if I was going to cry. I didn't know if I was just what I was going to do, but for a little while there, I wasn't here. I was back then. Yeah, it was just music, man. It's all these things, TV shows and books and video games, they can all take you back to a certain time, a certain place in your life, a certain place in your world, but I don't think that anything does it any better than music. Nothing is better than hearing an old song that'll take you back to some old memories, or perhaps you hear a song. I had this happen with World of Warcraft. I think I've mentioned this in those videos that I did about them. I would listen to my own music while I was playing those games, and now when I hear those songs, I think of World of Warcraft. It's just naturally ingrained. They are linked now forever. And this music will always be linked to that time in my life, and I will always look back fondly at those. But because of, I guess probably because of the way life is for me right now, all I do is just long to be back in that time. Long to be, you know, to go back to when I was a kid, and especially like my teenage years. I would say probably from roughly around 10 or 11 on till about 18 or 19. If I could just live in those years again, over and over again, I could be so happy. But you know, that's silly. That's nonsense. But I don't know. I just wanted to talk about that. There's no specific rhyme or reason to this. I'd probably like to do a Red Shadow Remembers 80's music video, and one of these days I probably will, so I could talk about a lot more of the music from the 80's that I love. But this one here right now, I just needed to talk about it. I needed to just talk about, you know, Debbie Gibson and her music and some of the other 80's music. that I found myself listening to tonight. It's just crazy. I never know what I'm going to get up to on any given night, especially when it comes to the internet. So, like I said, when or even if I'll upload this video, I don't know. But if I do upload this video, thanks for taking a little journey back for a little while, and I'll see you next time.